So when we bring the work into the space, we usually have a team of people working with me. I'm not there with a hammer and nail myself. In fact, I'm not normally allowed to touch the works because we have professional technicians who work in the museum, and they are very skilled in mounting exhibitions, hanging exhibitions. So they work with me. They would often be a conservator in the space as well, who is making sure that the work stays in good condition and is safe. So the technicians will very often build the exhibition display. So for example, in a sculpture exhibition like the one we're in, you'll see that there's a very big table built down the center of one of the rooms. That is to keep works off the floor. That is to make sure that they are also out of harm's way so that people can't touch them. And it's also so that you can see a lot of works that are similar in one place, so that it's a way of grouping things together that are of a similar idea, so that the viewer can see what those ideas were in one place. And hopefully when you go into the next room, that you can see that the ideas have changed 10 years later, that there has been a shift in the practice. Maybe that's material, maybe that's the story they're trying to tell, or maybe they're trying to tell something about their own lives, an event that's happened to them. After the exhibition has opened, maybe the exhibition is on for 3 or 6 months, it's important to understand that there is a team also working in the museum who look after the exhibition in many different ways. The first one is the security team. They might make sure that you're not trying to steal the work from the museum. And more than that, they're also going to give you advice. They're going to tell you where things are, give you directions through the exhibition, give you more information. We also have a mediator team, and they're the people that you'll see in the galleries themselves. And they're called mediators because they're supposed to mediate between you, the audience, and the artwork, to tell you the stories, to be able to answer your questions, to bring you on tours of the exhibition and let you know more about the work. Then we have a conservation process that happens through the exhibition. So every day, every artwork is checked 3 times to make sure that it hasn't been damaged by the audience, if they might have touched it accidentally. And if something has happened, then they will come and they will fix it straight away. And so, of course, as well, we talked about the condition of the works, and you have to think that every kind of object has different needs. So, for example, a drawing on paper, a painting might be oil on canvas, a sculpture might be made of marble, or it might be made of another material. You can have a photograph, you can have an installation, which is things scattered all around the floor. And each of those has different needs. But what we try and do is have a standard climate, which is agreed by all museums around the world, so that as you move one object from one museum to another one, that things aren't changing too much. And when we talk about climate, we're talking about the temperature of the room. So think in winter, it might be 4 degrees outside. It would be very, very cold. But you want to make sure that it's 20 degrees in the gallery. Similarly, in summer, it might be a very hot day. It might be 30 degrees outside. You want to make sure that it's 20 degrees inside the galleries, that the climate isn't changing, it's staying the same, because change causes damage. And then the other thing that you have is humidity. So you have climate and humidity. And humidity is, if it's a very, very wet, foggy day outside, the humidity might be 90%. It's almost like it's completely wet in the air. Or if it's a very, very frosty day, you know that the air is very dry. It might only be 20% humidity. And so, again, you want to have 50% humidity, which is halfway between the two all the time. So on a frosty day, it's 20 outside, it's 50 inside. On a wet, damp day, it might be 90 outside, it's 50 outside. And that's to keep it stable. You want to have no change in the climate because change will damage things. Paper, for example, if we're looking at a drawing, if you take something that's been very, very humid and move it into a very dry space, it loses its humidity too fast and the paper starts to crinkle up. It starts to look very, very wavy. And if it's got a medium like oil paint on it, that can flake off because there's too much movement. So you want to keep it at 50% all the time so that the paper is relaxed and straight, isn't moving, and so the material that's on the paper isn't falling off. Another thing that you'll see in the exhibition is lighting. So you might be on a bright summer's day, but you're going into a space that all of the blinds are down and the spotlights are on, and you're wondering, why would you do that? And very often that's again to do with works on paper, because paper is very sensitive to light. And if you have a piece of newspaper, for example, you'll see this at home, and you leave it in a sunny window, 3 weeks later you'll come back and the newspaper has turned brown. And that's because the acids in the paper have reacted to the sunlight and the paper is rotting in front of you. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen in the exhibition. It's important to keep, like the temperature and the humidity, the lighting at an even level. And for example, something that's incredibly fragile, you'll have 50 lux. 50 lux is the light level that you have. And 50 lux means that you really have to peer in the darkness at the object. 100 lux is twice as much light, but it's still actually very, 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 very dark in terms of seeing a work. If you imagine being outside on a sunny day, you're up to 3000 lux. So that's trying to explain what the differences in light are. So what we do is we tend to close the blinds so that you don't have a lot of strong sunlight coming into the space, and we control the light with spotlights. Each individual work, for example, a canvas can have much more light. That can have 300 lux. A sensitive work on paper might only have 50. So within one room, you might try and control the different light needs by using different types of spotlights. That's very different to a contemporary exhibition where the artist might want you to be able to see the landscape outside. So you have no blinds and everything is natural light, but that's the choice of the artist and the choice of the person lending the work to you. So this is an example of some of the things we have to think about when we are displaying the objects. So for example, here, they're drawings. They're already framed and they're behind glass, so people can't touch them. And similarly here on the left-hand side, there are sculptures, but they're very fragile. Some of them are made of alabaster, which is very fragile. So we have built wall vitrines, a plinth on the wall, and covered it with perspex so that you can see it very easily at eye level, but it's not possible to touch it because that would damage it. One of the other things to think about is the climate. So there is the temperature, which we want to keep at 20 degrees, and the humidity that we want to keep at 50%. But sometimes an object might come out of a collection which has been in a very hot room or a very dry room, and it will respond differently. And this is a good example beside me. If you can see the drawing on the left, it's completely flat. The paper is completely flat in the frame, but can you see in this one, the paper is starting to move a little bit. And that's because it came out of a room that had higher humidity into it, and now it's drying too quickly. So our conservators will look at this and they will try and stabilize the paper so that this waviness doesn't keep happening, but that it will be stabilized so that it looks more like this. And this is because coming out of one space into another will cause a change into the paper. The other thing we have to think about with paper is the lighting. So you'll see that we have spotlights on the sculptures, but not on the paper. And that's because we want to keep the paper at a lower light level than the sculptures. The sculptures aren't going to change, in this case, with a lot of light on them, but the paper would change color. It would darken and be damaged by having a lot of light on it. So in this room, you can see already the difference in the way that we have lit things. Another thing that the curator thinks about is the exhibition display. And so in this room, I knew that there were going to be about 20 bronze sculptures and drawings. And so I had a choice of either having 20 individual plinths, so that every individual work would be on a plinth on its own, or in this case, I decided to make one big plinth because I wanted people to be able to walk around, see things in order that they were made, make comparisons between things, and also not have you bumping into 20 different plinths. It would be very, very noisy to look at a display like that. But also I knew that I was going to have this big deer in the middle, so I knew that if it was raised up off the ground, that the design would be a wow factor, that you would come into the room and say, gosh, that looks arresting, that looks interesting. The practical things that we're thinking about is that the sculptures need to be off the ground. You want to be able to see them comfortably, and then it's important that they're not touched. So there's a barrier here in front of you to keep you not so close to them, but you'll notice that they're not behind glass. In the other room, we saw that there was fragile alabaster that must not be touched. This is bronze. It's slightly less fragile, so it can take accidental touching. And so we made the decision not to put these behind glass.